Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and we're delighted to welcome you to our live Census 101. Now more than ever, it is imperative to be counted in the census. And here to tell us why and how, I'm delighted to bring to you Maria de la Luz Garcia, the director of the LA Census here in Los Angeles, and Council Member Curran Price from District 9. Nice to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, there's so many issues at stake right now. There are so many passionate subjects that people are thinking about, and yet the census feels like it might take a back seat to that. But that's exactly the opposite of what is happening. The census is imperative right now, is it not?
That's exactly right. The census is really the foundation of our democracy, and we get so many benefits from achieving an accurate count. Right now, for instance, the city is receiving millions of dollars for COVID response from the federal government. Those funds are determined by census counts that we use and will be using for the next 10 years. So when we don't achieve an accurate count, the federal government won't know how many resources to send our way so that we can respond to things like COVID-19, to be able to provide additional resources to people who are suffering the economic impacts of going through a pandemic. People right now are applying for unemployment insurance and getting unemployment benefits at record numbers. And all of those benefits are all used by federal government to get accurate numbers for the number of people that live in this area and give us resources for responding for.
Okay, so just on a very basic level, what exactly is the census?
So the census is a count of everybody living in the country, and so it happens once every 10 years. And so we basically send out workers all across the country and get people counted.
Okay, and Councilmember Price, District 9, for some reason, has this sad reputation of being a really difficult district to count. Is there any kind of rationale or reason behind that?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for joining us today. The census, as Maria pointed out, so very, very important, especially in urban areas, in black and brown communities like the ones I represent. And historically, these areas have not returned the census forms, and so there's been an undercount, and we don't get an accurate data on individuals living there. So it's very, very important. The importance of this census really helps to identify programming to assist in small businesses, health programs, programs for our youth, programs for our children, for our elderly. These are all programs so very, very vital. And we've missed out sometimes on the funding because our numbers have been low. And there are a lot of reasons why people don't return the census forms. We have a number of renters, a high propensity of renters, in fact, in CD9. And so sometimes people are transient, they just don't return the forms. Sometimes they may be intimidated by the language, it may be a language issue. Which is not the case here because we have many languages able to respond. We have a high number of young people, those under 18. In fact, in the 9th District, a third of the population is under 18. And so we find that where we have lots of youth, sometimes there's an undercount. So we're just encouraging neighbors and friends to be counted and to make sure everyone in your household is counted so that we can have an accurate picture and to make sure that we get the resources that we deserve and that we need in our community.
Maria, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. You know, I use the words hard to count. Mm-hmm. So how do you define someplace that's hard to count?
That's a great question, and the council member is absolutely right. People are hard to count because they have traditionally been hard to reach, so the Census Bureau has had a difficult time getting to these families to be counted. And it could be for a number of reasons. There's families that are just hard to contact because they might move around a lot. In Los Angeles, we have a high rental population. And so people who only take out a rental agreement for 1 year might not live in the same location from 1 year to the next. And so because this is a process that happens only once every 10 years, those families might be actually hard to contact. There's also people who might be hard to interview because there's a language barrier between the Census Bureau interviewee and the interviewer. And so those households that might not have somebody living there that has a proficiency in English to respond to the census may opt not to participate because of that language barrier. Here in Los Angeles, we try to mitigate that challenge by providing support and resources for language assistance. But again, this is a federal process, and so we do the best that we can. But again, that might be one reason why some families might be hard to count. We also have among the highest population of immigrants living in Los Angeles. And right now, immigrants are not really confident that their information is going to be kept safe and confidential with the federal government, given that the government has not demonstrated their best interest at the moment. So these families are rightly so feel like their privacy might be compromised. So there's different reasons why populations are hard to count, but the Census Bureau defines hard to count populations as populations that are racial and ethnic minorities, immigrant populations, children 0 to 5 who have historically also been hard to count. There's also communities that are hard to count, like seniors, college students. So all of these different populations that for one reason or another are populations that the Census Bureau has had a hard time enumerating in the past. And that's what gives us the ability to be able to look at maps and data to try and project where we need to focus our resources and energy to try and get these populations counted.
And also, just kind of piggybacking on Maria's comments, people are just distrustful. They just don't believe that the government is there to help. And so, not just those who have immigrant issues or background, but many times citizens just don't feel that the government is really working for them. So they're hesitant to share information, to provide details and data about what's happening inside their household. And we're trying to encourage folks to let them know, one, this information is confidential, and it's vitally important that we have so that we get our fair share of the resources from the federal government on programs that will be helpful to our community.
Right, so it's a misinterpretation of how the information will be used, because the usage of the information is actually to the benefit of everybody who is hesitant to be counted. But you were talking about maps, and you were talking about how to see this. So we can see that we have a map that we can pull up, and where are we in regards to the count? How's LA doing in terms of all of that? In particular, let's deal with District 9.
Yeah, so the city of Los Angeles as a whole right now has a self-response rate of just over 51%. So just over.
Is that good? Is that bad?
That is a little bit below average from what other municipalities across the country are at right now. So we're not keeping pace with other municipalities across the country. And that's not surprising, or shouldn't be surprising, because we are the largest city within the hardest to count county in the entire country. So we're really in ground zero when it comes to hard to count populations. The fact that we're lagging behind other municipalities is not too much of a surprise. So just over half of our population has responded to the census questionnaire citywide. And our hardest to count areas geographically in the city are areas that we had already identified as hard to count. And so on the map that you see on the screen, there's really the shades of blue and purple. Those are areas that have higher self-response rates. So the deeper purple areas have the highest self-response rate at about 70 to 80% response. And then if you go down to the lavender, they're above 50%. So they're actually performing above average. The areas that are hardest to count in the city of Los Angeles are those areas that you see on your screen that are dark brown to burnt orange, and then peach colored / yellow. And so the darkest brown areas are those census tracts that have a response rate of 0 to 15%.
0 to 15%.
Yes. And in the city of LA, those chunks of areas are places like downtown Los Angeles, South LA, Central Los Angeles, Northeast Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, and parts of the harbor. And so when you zoom into places like Council District 9, Council District 9 doesn't have a single census tract above 50%. So all of the census tracts right now are responding below 50%, and some of those areas are between 0 to 15%, like the darkest brown census tract in that council district is where USC is located. USC is obviously right now shut down because of the pandemic, and so students have gone home, and so you can imagine how either households that are around the area are currently vacated because students are not living there, and students that were living on campus are no longer there as well because they've gone home for the summer. So places around USC are in the northern part of Council District 9, like Jefferson Park, Adams, and Expo Park are all experiencing lower than average response rates. And these are the places where right now we can really make a difference by making sure that people who are living there currently are responding to the census in the way that best fits their needs, whether that's online, by phone, or by responding to the paper questionnaire that was mailed to their household.
So you bring up a good question. How long do you have to be in a particular location to actually answer the census for that location? You mentioned the students from USC that would populate the area, at least to a certain degree, are not there because it's no longer, they're not in school. But say you get a census question, and you're just a renter and you're only going to be there a few more months. Should you still answer the census and have that address be yours, or is there a window of time in which you live in a particular place that qualifies you for answering the census for that particular zone?
Responding to the census, you should respond to the census where you lived on or before April 1st, 2020. So if you're a student at USC and you were living at USC for a majority of the time before April 1st, 2020, that's where you should have responded to the census. If you had gone home early because this university closed, then you would still have to respond to the census as if you were living in or around USC. So that's a very important distinction, is that people are responding to the census to where they lived the majority of the time on or before April 1st. So if that happens to be at a college campus or around a college campus, that's where the student would respond.
Because even the pandemic shifted not only students, but a lot of people's living situations. So Councilmember Price, I'm sorry, I almost interrupted you. You were going to say something about watching this map.
No, I was just going to underscore the importance of us responding and making sure that we get as accurate a count as possible. We know that, as I said, our communities, our black and brown neighborhoods especially, are traditionally undercounted. And so this is an extra special effort we're making to encourage folks to participate in the census. And to understand how important it is, not just for their families, but for the community at large.
Does it make you nervous when you see your district and not, having...
Well, it doesn't make me nervous. It just makes me know that we have a lot of work to do.
Right.
We certainly are committed to making sure that neighbors and friends realize how easy it is and how important it is to participate in the census.
Okay, well, we do have a question actually from someone who's watching, and so the question is, what are you doing to reach the 20 plus Spanish-speaking population in the district?
Yeah, so we actually,
20%.
We are doing a lot of things, and we have had to pivot our outreach efforts because of the pandemic. Just like everybody else, we've been impacted with our outreach efforts. And so what we've done to make sure that we continue to encourage households to respond is by operating a remote phone bank operation. So we have been able to utilize the volunteers that were recruited before the pandemic and have asked them to make phone calls on our behalf encouraging people to respond and providing them with information and resources. Since the start of that remote phone bank operation, we've been able to call about 44,000 households and been able to refer them to information, and especially in their language if they need language assistance. We're still making those phone calls. So if you're tuning in to us right now and you want to get involved, please help us make those phone calls. We are still taking volunteers. You can sign up at census.lacity.org and help us make those calls. Encourage your community to respond to the census questionnaire.
Because as you said, you did have to make some adjustments. The knocking on the door and speaking to people, directly, I am sure was not something that could continue with the pandemic. And I'm sure that also was an issue because that would have been an opportunity for people in a safe space to ask questions and get some things clarified before they felt comfortable. So the phone bank, I'm sure, is the best way to do that now.
Absolutely. It's a great way for us to be able to continue to spread the good word about the census and still keep people safe at home and make sure that they're keeping themselves safe.
Now, we've been correlating the importance of the census to what has been currently happening. And I know in your district, what has happened with the pandemic in terms of testing and that sort of thing has some ramifications to what the census had told the government about your area before. So what are some of the things that the census helped with COVID-19 in terms of testing, et cetera?
Well, we certainly have been encouraging greater testing. I'm pleased that we've got a number of test sites in CD9. And there again, it's been an effort of a public information campaign, encouraging folks to be tested. It's easy, it's free, and it again protects themselves and their families and the community. And we're also encouraging them to fill out the census form because they both go to making sure that we have a healthy, vibrant community, not just for now, but in the future, especially for our kids.
Okay, so basically what is on a census form? What are some of the questions?
So the information on the census form is actually very simple, and people don't need to have a lot of information at the tip of their fingertips in order to respond. The basic question is, how many people are living in your household? That's the first thing the Census Bureau is going to ask, right? They just want a total number of a head count. And then after that, they'll ask you about the name, age, date of birth, relationship to that person, gender, and relationship to you of every single person living in that household. And then they'll also ask about the kind of housing that you live in and whether you rent or own. And then finally, the Census Bureau will ask for a phone number in case they need to ask any follow-up questions for your household. That's it. They don't ask you about citizenship. They don't ask you about immigration status. They don't ask you for a social security number. The only real piece of private information that you might want to have some reservations about is the date of birth and age. Aside from that, you're just really giving the Census Bureau the total count of people that are living in your household and then just basic information about each of those individuals.
One person per family, but what if you're in a roommate situation? So let's go ahead and play out some of these puzzles.
Sure.
Because sometimes the basic things are the things that trip you up. All right, so you are my roommate. Who's filling out the census?
Any one of us could fill out the census. It could be yourself, or it could be me, or individually we can respond on our own. It doesn't have to just be one person. If you're living in a situation where it's multiple families, for instance, as many of our families in our economically depressed areas might also be living with multiple families under one roof, each family can fill out their own census form, and they could do so online, reporting for each of their family members. And so what the Census Bureau is most concerned about is making sure that everybody is being counted and accounted for. So whether it's you and I as roommates and you decide to respond on both of our behalf, that's fine. If we don't have that kind of relationship and we just share a roof, but you do your thing and I do mine, it's fine that each of us fill out the census on our own.
Okay, and what happens if you don't want to say something on the census? What if you don't want to put your phone number? What if you don't want to put, the age or the date of birth of, your husband, child, grandfather, roommate?
It's not mandatory to answer all of the questions. You can certainly leave some questions blank. The only risk that you impose on yourself is basically having a census enumerator follow up with you and your household if there's a need to, or if you left so many questions blank that they really need just more information.
How can people in your district fill out the census? What are some of the things that your office is working on so that this can be a simple and easy thing for people in Council
Well,
District
again,
9 to
we're
do?
encouraging folks to fill out the form because it's easy, it's painless, and it can be done in a number of ways. They certainly can return the form that they received in the mail. They can call in, providing information to our phone bank. They can log on to do it online. They can make a phone call. So there are a number of ways that folks can participate, but it's important that they do so. And we're trying to let them know that it's easy, it's painless, it's non-intrusive. We're not going to take all your lifetime information to use it for some other purpose. But these are the kinds of this count is important because it really dictates the level of services that we get. Many of our community already are beneficiaries of the WIC program or of the SNAP program, providing foods for their families, or they are participating in the Medicare program. Or they're a small business, and so they get help from the Small Business Administration, SBDC. They're programs for our youth, for our seniors, a number of programs that really are funded depending upon the census count. And so that's why we're encouraging, and as Maria pointed out, this count lasts for 10 years. These figures are in place for 10 years, and so we have complaints now about programs that we're not benefiting from. It's because the count 10 years ago was low or was inaccurate or didn't take into account the new demographic realities. So now is an exciting time to make sure you're participating in the process, that you are identifying your issues, your concerns, and that you're being counted. That's the most important thing. Be counted so that we can make sure you're accurately represented.
I don't think people have a real correlation, and I know we've said this now at least 3 or 4 times, but a real correlation to what the census impacts down the line. We started out with the census. It has legitimately impacted how the city has been able to respond to the pandemic. And now you're talking about programs that people who are in desperate need require to elevate the quality of their own life and to get a fresh start.
Well, it's not always someone in desperate need. I mean, these are just basic services that citizens are able to benefit from. Seniors, our youth, our families, children, programs. So it's not just those who are in need who are able to benefit from these programs. We all benefit from them.
Do you hear personally from anyone in your district about how they feel about the census? Have you gotten questions from people, who direct?
Well, yeah, they wonder why is it really important?
Right.
How is information going to be used? Many of the things we've discussed already. But I took the census a couple of months ago and been encouraging my neighbors and friends and constituents to do the same. We want to make sure that our numbers at the end of the day are up and that we don't fall into the trap of not responding.
Because a lot of it, and the reasons people aren't answering, is because there's some myth, there's some irrational thoughts, there's some fears. So what are some of the myths that you just want to completely squash to make sure that people have the confidence in this particular process?
Absolutely. So we definitely want to make sure that people understand that the citizenship question that had been rumored that was going to be on the questionnaire for 2 years prior to the actual census coming out, they're not going to ask you for anything about your citizenship status or your immigration status. So you're not going to be reporting on your family or your own immigration or citizenship status, so no citizenship question on this questionnaire. There was also some rumors going on through social media about how responding to the census was somehow tied to the stimulus checks that were being issued by the federal government for COVID relief. And that is absolutely not true. Your census response is in no way tied to receiving the stimulus check. So you can respond to the census on your own, and the stimulus check that your family received is separate and apart from what the census is doing. And then we also want to remind people that your information is private and confidential and is secure for up to 72 years. And this is in part due to the Title 13 of the U.S. Code. So legally, the federal government cannot share your information with anyone for any reason, including law enforcement, other government agencies. And so that includes information that, like, for instance, your landlord. So if you're responding to the census questionnaire and you have some concerns about your landlord knowing exactly how many people live in your apartment, don't worry, your landlord is not going to get that information. All your information is kept private and confidential and secure with the U.S. Census Bureau, and it's not shared with anybody for any reason. And then we also want to make sure that people understand that everybody counts. No matter your age, your citizenship or immigration status, the relationship that you have to the person living under the same roof as you, everybody counts, including your youngest people living in the household, children 0 to 5. For some reason,
As long as they were born before April 1st.
That's right. As long as they were born before April 1st. So make sure that everybody in your household counts.
Okay. And I know there's also, getting the word out and the outreach to make sure that people understand clearly, concisely, and how they can get any kind of information that they need about the census.
Absolutely. We have been doing this for the last 2 years just in preparation for the 2020 census. And so we have a tremendous amount of resources that we've developed and are available. If you are watching us right now and want to get involved and you don't know where to start, first go to our website, census.lacity.org. And then if you want outreach resources, click on our outreach resources tab, and you'll find information there in 12 different languages, flyers and posters. You'll find guides for how your information is kept safe and confidential, so you'll have that explanation and be able to communicate that to others that you're trying to convince to respond to the census questionnaire. We have flyers that list all of the different phone numbers in the different languages. So if somebody in your community needs to respond to the census in a language other than English, we have that flyer for you so that you can hand that out and say, just call this number and respond in the language of your choice. We have PSAs. So if you're more of a social media person and that's how you influence, we have PSAs that you can post directly onto your social media platform through our Social Press Kit website. And Social Press Kit is really great because it really is one click away for you to upload and post census graphics and messages onto your wall. So it really makes it easy for somebody who doesn't want to get too complicated in terms of copying and pasting, and you can just really click on something and then have it go directly to your Facebook, to your Twitter, to your Insta. And then we have plenty of videos that people can share. So these are videos that we created using the volunteers that we've been working with here in Los Angeles. So these are people from our very own communities that have stepped up and got involved and getting out the word.
There are also some employment opportunities for individuals who have an interest. There's some part-time employment, I think, from August through end of the year, December. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. The U.S. Census Bureau is still hiring thousands and thousands of jobs for their enumerator, census taker positions. These are the people that are going to be knocking on doors between August and the end of October. And they're really great job opportunities that are seasonal, that are flexible, they're good paying jobs. and a great way to get back into the job market, especially during these times where we've seen so many people lose their jobs because of COVID-19. So the Census Bureau is still hiring. You can go to 2020census.gov and apply online. The sooner you apply, the better, because these jobs are filling up fast, and you better believe that that they're going to go away as quickly as they came in. So.
Well, this is such great information, and Councilmember Price, I have no doubt that the next time we sit down and talk, everybody in your district is going to have filled out the census.
Well, they're going to be tested, and
there you go. It's going to be great. Well, Maria Kern, thank you so much for being a part of this, and thank you for being a part of this. And make sure you go fill out your census form.